Thank you for braving the traffic this morning to get here. I know a few of you had quite an ambitious commute, so I appreciate you making it here so early. My name is Linda Gallipo, and I'm the CEO of Randstad in North America. I'm delighted to welcome you this morning to our Women Powering Business discussion. This is the fourth such panel discussion that I've had the pleasure of hosting, and I can tell you that each and every one is different, and each and every one has gotten great reviews from both the people who attended and the people that were able to watch it online. I think that everybody walks away a little bit more inspired, a little bit more energized, and with some very concrete ideas about things that we can start doing, which is usually relatively easy, and things that perhaps we need to think about stopping to do, which is typically a little bit more difficult. We've assembled for you today a panel of 5 very accomplished women. You'll be hearing their stories in a few minutes. And we'll be asking our panelists some questions that we think are the questions that you would want answers to, so they can kind of give us their insights, their experience from their own perspective. Also, you know, as a perspective of a woman making her way through the leadership ranks, but also as a woman or a man mentoring and sponsoring women who themselves are coming up in their careers. And I know that many of you, if not most of you in the audience, have both of those things on your mind as you'll be listening to the discussion today. So I hope you'll get a lot out of it. I would also tell you that the last 15 minutes or so will be for questions, and often the question portion is the most interesting part of the discussion. And one thing we hear about women is we don't like to be the first one to talk, so let's prove them wrong. And so be thinking of your questions as you listen to the panel discussion, and you'll have the opportunity to ask them at the end. So right now, just to kind of set the tone for the morning, I'm going to introduce you to our special guest of the morning. As you may or may not know, Randstad is the sponsor of us, but one of the sponsors of a Formula One racing team, the Williams team, and they're going to be racing in Austin this weekend. I'm going to have the pleasure of seeing them race. Formula One is a sport, the popularity of which is really growing rapidly here in the U.S. It's a major sport in Europe, as you probably know. And Susie Wolff is on the Williams team. She is a test driver. Susie is one of only 4 women to be involved in Formula One racing this decade. So I think that fits the bill of a trailblazer in a non-traditional role, certainly for a woman since 1950. So in the last almost 65 years, only 5 women have participated in F1 races. So that really shows you. And it's surprising. I was very surprised the first time I saw the car, because the compartment for the driver to sit is quite petite. So to me, it's a perfect job for a woman, but Susie still needs to convince a few more men that that's what needs to happen. Anyway, I'd like to welcome to the stage Susie Wolff. All right, up in the chairs. Up we go. All right. So Susie, tell us just a little bit about how you got into driving as a youngster. What possessed you to pursue this sport?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm in a very male-dominated world, so to come to events like this and see so many other successful women, it's always really nice and inspiring. Mostly when people see me for the first time, their first comment is, "You don't look like a racing driver." I don't know what a female racing driver is supposed to look like, but I do fight quite hard against the stereotype that I should be like a little aggressive monster. And normally the second thing they always say is, how did you ever become a racing driver? And it's very interesting for me to look back, because there were, I think, a couple of key things in my childhood which made me believe that I could do whatever I wanted to do. I had quite a romantic start in life, because my mum actually met my dad when she went to buy her first motorbike from his shop. So I think it was in the blood.
Yeah, it was a prophetic moment. Yeah.
I had a little quad bike when I was only 2 years old, and I used to follow my dad around as he was racing bikes at the time, and my mum also traveled with him, supporting him. And I grew up in that environment, and I was lucky in that I had an older brother. He was only 18 months older than me, and as those of you who have children maybe know, who with a girl with an older boy, anything my brother could do, I could do. That was always in my head. So I think that, combined with the fact that I had parents who very much made me believe you can do whatever you want to do. It's not about you playing with the Barbie and your brother playing with He-Man. If you enjoy being on a quad bike, you're going on the quad bike. So I was never made to believe that I should be doing something a girl should do and my brother not. And when I was 8, I then switched from a quad to a little go-kart, and that was the start. You know, I loved it, and I went on to compete in races. And many people have the perception, because that I'm a Formula One development driver now, that I got in that kart for the first time, blew everybody away, and was a natural talent for the future. But actually the opposite was true. My first time in the kart, I can remember very vividly, I got out onto the track, and all the other little karts, mostly boys, actually all boys, were flying past me, and they were kind of hitting me on their way past. And I came into the pits and I said to my dad, really don't like that out there. They're all much quicker than me. They're hitting me as they go past, and it's frightening. And he said, Toots, that was always his nickname for me, Toots. He said, you've got 2 options now. We're going to take the cart, put it in the back of the truck, call it a day, or you're going to go back out there. When they go past and hit you, you're going to hit them back twice as hard, and you're just going to try and go faster every lap. I think you guys can guess which option I went for. I went for the second option.
That's good advice we all need to follow. If they try to hit you, just hit them back twice as hard.
Just hit them back twice as hard.
First lesson of the morning. Susie, do you think that other young girls look at you and get inspired and go home and think, gee, maybe I could be a driver?
Yes, many people ask why there aren't many women in racing. But if you're a little girl and you switch on, I mean, I think it's slightly different in the US because you guys have Danica, Simona, you have role models who are racing at the high level, but particularly in Europe, in Formula One, there are hardly any women. So if a little girl is watching the race on the television, because we're the biggest sport globally, she doesn't see that there's a woman on track racing. So why should she ever think that she could race? And I think that's something that we very much have to change. A very interesting story which I heard this year. My brother, who's a film director, made a BBC documentary on my racing, which was aired at the start of this year. And our head of aero at Williams' team, a very, very important job because aerodynamics are so important in Formula One, he has a little daughter who's only 5 years old. And he said she knew that her dad did racing, and that every second weekend he would have to kind of go away for a couple of hours to watch a race on television, but she just wasn't interested in it. And they were watching a documentary on television, and she was playing on her iPad, and he said, but she looked up and she said, but that's a girl getting into the Formula One car. And he said, yeah, that's Susie. She's one of the drivers in our team. And she said, but girls are not allowed to race. And he said, yes, girls are allowed to race. That's Susie getting into the F1 car, and girls can race. If you wanted to be a racing driver, you could. Now, every race, she sits with her dad watching the races because in her head, it switched. It was suddenly something that she could do, so she became interested in it. So I think it's just something that has to change in society, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. Talk to us about some of the down moments. So the moments where you either felt, is this ever going to happen for me, or you questioned whether or not you were on the right path.
There was many of those moments. I mean, it's sometimes quite difficult because people see me in this position of being at Formula One level and think it was a glided path to the top. But there was very, very tough moments along the way. If I would pick out a couple of outstanding moments, one was in 2003, I'd been nominated for a very big award in the UK called the Young Driver of the Year Award, and there had never been a female into the final 6. And at the end of the season, we were all brought to a big awards ceremony with all the big hitters within motorsport and Formula One in the audience. And the winner was going to be announced of the award. So there was 5 guys who had made the final, myself. And we were up on the stage, and for those of you who know Formula One, Sir Jackie Stewart is quite a key figure from history, a former world champion. He was presenting the award. So we were brought up onto the stage at the beginning of the evening and introduced to the audience. So he said the names of the 5 boys and then said, oh, but we're missing our sixth finalist, where's the sixth finalist? And there was me up on stage next to the 5 guys. And the room went silent, and eventually I stepped forward and said, well, I'm the sixth finalist, my name is Susie. And he looked at me with a comical look on his face and kind of said, that's right, we've got a girl in the competition this year. And at that moment, I knew I hadn't won, because he knew he wasn't reading a girl's name when he was going to announce the winner. And when I got off stage, his wife then came to me and said, why would you ever want to be a racing driver? And in moments like that, I did think to myself, what am I up against here? But I kind of used moments like that to help me with my determination as well, because I always said, okay, I am going to show you that I am going to be a racing driver. And just to complete the story full circle, I got awarded by Edinburgh University last month an honorary degree for contribution to women in sport. And who gave me the award? Sir Jackie Stewart.
What's your advice, Susie, to people, to women who are themselves, forging a path, perhaps through a more male-dominated world, or just in the standard challenging world that many of us work? What would some of your best advice be?
I mean, I think all of you are successful in your own right, so I don't want to preach, but I can only say what I learned along my path so far is follow your gut feeling. Follow your gut feeling and your passion in life, because if you are doing what you love to do or what you enjoy doing, the tough days are so much easier to cope with because you're doing something you really enjoy. And there was a key moment in my career. I was at Edinburgh University studying what you study when you have no idea what you want to be, international business. And I had completed my first year and had come back to start my second year, but I felt like a duck out of water. I didn't feel in the right environment there. I was trying to carry on with my racing, trying to study, not doing both as well as I could. And I was walking back from the first lecture of the year, and I sat on the park bench and just said to myself, what are you doing now? This is not you. This is not the path. And my gut feeling said, you want to be a racing driver. And it was a risky decision because it very often doesn't work out. There's only in sport a very few that make it to the top. But I said to myself, I need to know that I gave it my best shot. So I called home, and luckily it was my dad that answered. And I said, I want to leave university. And he said, okay, go home, pack your things. I'm going to collect you in the morning, and then you're going to decide what you're going to do. And 2 days later, I had a little car filled with all my worldly belongings. I drove down to Silverstone, the main track in the UK, and boarded in a house with other racing drivers and started the dream. I had nothing, I had no money, but I was happy. I was on my path. I was doing what I wanted to do, and ultimately it worked out for me, and I'm very thankful for that. So I think what I would say is just follow that gut feeling, follow that passion, and sometimes it is scary, but I think ultimately it brings you a lot more contentment and happiness.
Susie, thank you. It's a great story. I think it's a very inspirational story to hear. You're a role model to many of us, so that's wonderful. And good luck this weekend.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. Thank you. I'd now like to welcome to the stage Lisa Crawford. Lisa is the Executive Vice President of Human Resources for Randstad. And Lisa will be introducing our panelists.
Good morning. Am I live? Hello. Hello. So I think I actually have the hardest job today, let alone what Susie does when she hops into that racing car, because I have to distill down the bios of these 5 women and get it done in less than 5 minutes. So without further ado, I'm going to get moving. I'd like to welcome Kim Zayadi to the stage, and I'm going to talk as she's walking up just to sort of keep the pace going. So a little bit of a non sequitur here. Dustin Pedroia, Cam Neely, Pedro Martinez, Doug Flutie, all Boston sports legends, but something even more important that they have in common is Kim. Kim is the founder and CEO of Blue Sky Sports and Entertainment. She's played a leading role in managing the careers of and brands of several A-list athletes like these. In addition, she's also worked with leading companies like Pepsi, Nike, Bank of America, and Oracle. And she's also negotiated on behalf of several local and national radio and TV personalities. Kim is a graduate of Boston College and the New England School of Law. We actually chatted earlier. It turned out she and I worked in the same building, and she was saying, although we didn't know each other, and saying at night she would run out of the building and get to law school. So she actually did it the hard way. She did it at night. So hats off to you. Prior to forming Blue Sky in 2003, she was the general counsel and director of athletic marketing and media representation for Wolf Associates. She's a founding member of WISE, Women in Sports and Events, New England, and also serves on the board of the Cam Neely Foundation for Cancer Care. And Kim and her husband, Matt, have 2 kids, and they live on the South Shore of Boston. And it also took you an hour and 10 minutes to get here this morning. Excellent. Okay, now I'm going to call up Donna Levin. Donna. Has anyone here ever experienced what I like to call the child care trifecta? So that's a combination of a sick child, a traveling spouse, and an early morning meeting with your boss. So thanks to Donna Levin. Here, I don't want to be blocking her from the audience here. She's co-founder and VP of operations for Care.com. Hopefully the child care trifecta will become a thing of the past for working parents like us. At Care.com, Dawn oversees all the systems, policies, and procedures that govern member care, including placements, vetting, backup care, very important, and the company's Care Concierge program. She has 15 years as a social entrepreneur. I love that term. Holding leadership positions at such diverse organizations as You Promise, Furniture.com, Turning Point Software, and Thompson Financial. Donna also serves on advisory boards of the Boston Chamber Women's Network and WEST, where she promotes the advancement of women in science, engineering, and technology. She's also on the board of overseers at Emerson College, where she graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree, and she's a board member of the Center for Women in Enterprise. Welcome. Okay, up next, Debbie Kleiman. When most of us were asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, we probably didn't answer, I'd like to be an inspiration instigator, a community builder, or an evangelist. It's also unclear if these were Debbie Kleiman's lifelong dreams, but here she is. She's the president of MITEX, the Massachusetts Innovation and Technology Exchange, and on any given day she wears these hats along with many, many others. MITEX is the Commonwealth's premier industry association for web and mobile innovators, and the group that's promoting Massachusetts as the best place to be for companies at the intersection of marketing and innovation. So take that, Silicon Valley. Debbie came to MITEX from Communispace as a VP of product marketing. She's also worked in marketing at Gillette, Welch's, Coca-Cola, and held several and also helped several key startups as a mentor and marketing advisor. She's got a Bachelor of Science degree from Cornell and an MBA from Harvard. And one thing that we did learn that she wants to do when she grows up is that she would like to have her own late-night talk show. So watch out, Conan and Jimmy Fallon, beware. Okay, next to the stage, Victoria Budson. Come on up. Many of this room probably consider a day successful when we get through our to-do list at work, get home in one piece, and maybe have dinner, squeak it in before 10 o'clock. That's probably like an average day for me. Victoria Budson considers her day successful when she's done something to close the gender gap in economic participation, political opportunity, health, and education. I'm honestly tired just saying that. So Victoria is the founding executive director of the Women in Public Policy program, or WAP, at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. She also serves on the Department of State Steering Committee at the Women in Public Service Project. She advises the Obama White House on policies to close gender gaps at the national level, and she chairs the Mass Commission on the Status of Women. I saw a quote from Victoria in the press release packet that I actually found was very insightful. At least it really struck me as to the type of impact that she's having on women. She said, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, I find that all women have a vision of what they could contribute and a concern as to their own capacity and efficacy. They often ask, am I good enough? Do I know enough to get to the next level? I remind women that these are reasonable questions, but the most important one is, how will the process benefit from my having participated? What will be lost if I stay on the sidelines? What indeed? And finally, last but not least, Helen Drynan, please come to the stage. How many of you in this room either went to Simmons College or know someone who went to Simmons, either graduate or undergraduate? Woohoo! Okay. In Boston, it seems to me at any large gathering of professional women, Simmons is always such a dominant presence in the room. And there's a reason for this. Her name is Helen Drynan. She's currently the president of Simmons College, but she's had a relationship with the school spanning almost 40 years. You started as a very young child. Formerly chair of the Simmons Board of Trustees, Helen also has degrees from the School of Management and the Graduate School of Library Sciences. And in just 5 years running the place, she's moved the school's balance sheet from a $10 million deficit to a $6 million surplus. I think many of us would like to have her as our CFO. Prior to her stint at Simmons, Helen was the SVP of HR at Caritas Christi Healthcare and an EVP at Bank Boston, which, is that Bank of America now? It was, yeah, okay, it's 25 incarnations ago. Lest you think hers is the typical corporate resume, Helen graduated from Mount Holyoke College and went right into the Peace Corps working in the Philippines. I should note she went with her husband, who's also her childhood sweetheart, and the fun little fact I was able to get from Helen is that she met him in the 9th grade at a school dance and knew she would marry him. Didn't tell anyone. She's like, this one's for me. And 7 years later, they got hitched. They've just celebrated their 45th anniversary together and have 3 children. So welcome. Without further ado, please enjoy the panel. Thanks, Linda. Take it away.
Thank you all. Very excited to hear your perspectives on some of our subjects this morning. So I'm going to start with a question about the book Lean In. So it was published this year, and it's been much talked about. And if any of you haven't read it, I do recommend it. I honestly only read it myself because in our panel in San Francisco, we had the CEO of Lean In on the panel, so I thought I'd better read the book. And it was amazing. It was not what I expected, and I think I can see how it can forcefully change perspectives by making us reflect on things we take for granted. One of the chapters in the book and one of the themes in the book is what Sheryl Sandberg refers to as the leadership ambition gap. So she cites study after study, and I'm sure we all have our own examples of this, where men aspire to greater things than women. More men see themselves in the C-suite than women. More young boys, see themselves, rising to high levels of leadership than girls do. Why is that, and what can we do about it? Who would like to start? Kim. Sorry, Kim.
I think for me, I think it starts at a very young age. I think we need to start teaching our girls and our daughters that you can do whatever you want to do. I know as a child growing up, my parents always said to me, whatever you want to be, you can be. There was no discussion about male-female roles or what was appropriate. And I think we also have to learn that through the course of progressing in our careers from starting out to getting to the point where we're progressing up the ladder is that we have to learn to be our biggest advocates. Mm-hmm. I had a male mentor, but I learned very quickly that he would only push me so far. And I don't know specifically why that was, but I think part of it was there was a little intimidation factor there because I do have a strong personality, but I learned very quickly that I had to be my biggest advocate. Use the people around you to assist, but don't be afraid to speak up and advocate for yourself, but I do think it starts from a very young age, encouraging our girls.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a mindset thing, and it can start at a very young age. I also had great women role models in my life from a very young age. My mother's a very successful executive, and it was dinner table talk to talk about business, to talk about success, to talk about leadership. So to have that kind of permeate your existence and that belief that you can do anything at any time, I think is a mindset shift that we have to all agree that we're going to work on together. And I think, unfortunately, for many women facing an opportunity in leadership, we think, what do we have to give up to get there? And men think, what am I going to get when I get there?
Well put.
And I think that that's a big part of what holds us back is because we're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss the soccer game or the play or whatever for our kids if I take on this next big challenge, where I think a man generally would go towards the point of like, oh my gosh, this is such a great opportunity for me. I can grow, I can learn. And I think that we have to talk ourselves into approaching leadership opportunities that way right out of the gate.
I think there's an element of our experience as little girls, adolescents, and mature adults that has to do with money and power as well for women. Some of the research we've done at Simmons on young girls indicates that girls see business as doing bad, and they want to do good. Now, why do they think that business is doing bad? Because we have so much in our press and in our society that shows the bad side of business. And I think we're really fighting against that, because what it leads to is a lot of women who want to move in the direction of not-for-profit and good things, rather than in the direction of for-profit and powerful things. And I think that confusion leads a lot of people to not understanding that you can do more good if you've done well than if you're struggling with really mediocre resources. So we need to break the connection between money, power, and doing good, and seeing men as willing to do the money, power thing, and women as not willing to do the money, power thing. And in the end, I think you have more power if you understand the world of money and power than if you aver it. If you work actively to stay out of that world and circumvent it, you are just not positioned long-term to see yourself as a person that has the kind of wherewithal to stand up against the forces of money and power. We all know there are bad sides of money and power, but there are fantastic sides of money and power. And if we're not part of that, we're missing a huge opportunity. It really scares me when I think that so many women associate words which we think of as quite definitively male words as bad things that they don't want to be, because that's just too simplistic. We need to get in there and understand. If you really experience worlds that are full of money and power, and you're a part of it, you can have an influence over how the money and power work. But if you stay away, you're never going to change a thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you said. I agree. I don't know how many of you have daughters or young children in your life, but one of the things that really frustrates me, and I can recall hearing a lot as a child, even though I was told I could do whatever, it was constantly as a girl, well, that's not nice. You want to be a nice girl. You know, here's how nice girls behave. I have a younger brother. No one ever cared if he was nice. And he still doesn't care if he's nice. He doesn't care how he's perceived in the world. I was talking to, a fellow executive who was talking to me going, hey, I'm getting this data that I'm just so driven about hitting revenue that I'm not perceived as nice. I was like, why are we having this conversation? None of our male counterparts, they don't care if they're perceived as nice. They're going to go hit their revenue targets. Go do what you have to do. So when we hear that women don't want to have those positions, I think all that stuff just somehow comes back and comes into play of how am I going to be perceived.
You know, our panelist from Lean In made a very good comment on this subject. She said, she talked about the word bossy, right? Boys are never told they're bossy, right? And whereas when girls, it's pejorative, don't be bossy, right? This is not a compliment, don't be bossy. So one of her initiatives, she believes, is we should ban this word and replace it with practicing executive leadership skills.
That is so
So when a girl is bossy, we commend her for practicing her executive leadership skills. I thought that was a very good point, because we do drill in the wrong message from a very young age. Victoria, what are your thoughts on
And
this
we
subject?
continue to drill it.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that Donna correctly identified, which our research delves into, is when women are seen as competent, they're seen as less warm. It works like a seesaw. Warmth and competence, culturally, in the West, are viewed that the more competent a woman is, the less warm or nice she is. And that's a very high value in our culture. So the women who are viewed as most competent organizationally then have to pay the tax in the organizational culture for how they're perceived as less warm, which means that their ratings are usually lower on occasion by their staffs and teams, which can give them repercussions in the unit. where men don't have to navigate that double edge. There are things that one can do to help mitigate that. Lean In's most quoted person is Larry Summers, one of my colleagues at the Kennedy School. And the second most quoted person is Hannah Riley Bowles from our center, whose work focuses on women in negotiation. Our work at the Women in Public Policy program does two things. We identify how do we change large systems so that there's less bias in them, and how do you navigate the existing systems? Because we all want to change systems. Those of us who are architects of systems, we want our systems to have less bias. And those of us who are in systems want the systems to have less bias. But what we know is when women don't speak up for themselves, it's not just that women aren't trained or women aren't comfortable. It's that women are correctly reading the audibles. When we speak up and ask for ourselves, we have to pay a price for that. Women are seen as less likable and someone who people want to work with less when women negotiate on behalf of themselves. I am not sharing what I wish the world was, I'm sharing what we know the world is. But there are skills and tools that one can deploy to mitigate those types of effects. So whenever you get that feeling that you really want something in the office environment, but you kind of know you shouldn't ask at this moment, and you think, what's wrong with me that I don't want to ask? Nothing is wrong. You are correctly reading your environment, and the key is to have tools so that you can say, I'm aware that this is going to be a challenge, and now I know what to do. And what we have found is if one employs a script, as Donna pointed out, people want Donna to be nice. It is of high value to other people. So Donna or Victoria or Helen or Kim needs to say something if they don't want that backlash effect that mitigates it. So you can say, I really enjoy working in this environment. What a wonderful team of colleagues we have, because I've now demonstrated that I'm relational, which means that I'm nice, which means I'm a good woman, which means the other person can now hear me.
Yeah.
Their ears are open because they're like, all right, this all makes sense in my universe. And then one can make the ask, and we find the backlash is significantly diminished. And then lastly, I have a view that I do not feel that there is an ambition gap. I do not think that women or girls lack ambition. They lack support for their ambition, and they lack belief because of what they see in the world, that the dreams that they have could be scripted in ways that they've never seen a model for. Susie shared beautifully how that young girl, it was not that she lacked interest, it's that she lacked a belief that that Formula One racing had anything to do with her. Which doesn't mean she lacked ambition, which in essence can be viewed as a fault of the girl. It means she lacked belief that that world was open to her. And one is not ambitious towards worlds that we believe are closed. So the key is, how do we create support systems for ourselves and organizationally where all of the talent that we have or that our organization has a belief of what's possible.
So let's talk a little bit more about behaviors, though, because I think that's a very interesting subject. So we're concerned about not being perceived as nice. We're concerned about being too nice. So sacrificing the result for the relationship, that's a big issue. I like very much your kind of inoculating the room. I'm empathetic. Now let me say what I was going to say. Now I get on with it.
Very time consuming.
Very time consuming, whatever. What else? What other advice do you have for women in terms of either things they should stop doing, things that you see women leaders do because they're either trying to show that they're nice or are just too nice, or things they need to start doing to really take their place? Because the flip side of this question is, when push comes to shove and when it's time to pick the leader, very often both men and women don't perceive the women to be tough enough. And sometimes they've been working too hard to demonstrate how, nice they are. And then when it's time that we need somebody, everybody understands that that person can't be all that nice, that the woman isn't considered a viable candidate. So what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? Couple of tips. They're real simple things. Yes.
First thing I would say is it is very important to define these words that are being used in a way that is meaningful to you. And I feel the most important thing for a woman who wants to be perceived as serious but not too tough and to deal with the quote-unquote nice part is to have profit and loss responsibility as early as possible in your career. Whatever your career is, get that responsibility as soon as possible. We all know that if you perform against that kind of target, that mitigates a lot of the conversation about niceness or toughness. It isn't the total solution, but get that P&L responsibility as early, and then again, as often as possible. I know I spent a career in a large financial institution as a staff person, and I knew from the beginning I would never be a candidate for CEO. And now that I am the CEO of a very, very demanding organization, I know I could have done that job, but it wasn't in the cards because I wasn't on the P&L track. And I never got accused of being too nice or too tough. I was always viewed as a colleague right at the management table. But without that P&L responsibility, I closed off opportunities. I did it with my eyes wide open because part of the choices we all make in the course of our careers are those choices which say, where am I in my life? What are my values at this point in my life? How do I reconcile those values with the demands of the opportunities I'm looking at? So I made that choice with my eyes wide open because I had 3 growing children, all of whom were almost adolescents, and I thought, they need me more now than they needed me when they were little babies, because I could take care of the best child care in the world. I could do everything I could to make sure they were safe, happy, educated, well entertained, all of those things. When they're adolescents, they're facing all the decisions of the world that are very hard to make when your hormones are high and your brain power is still growing. So for me, that was a critical thing. Well, we know it's true. It was critical. But now I see myself in a job where I don't have those conflicts. I spend enormous amounts of time on this job. And I understand why the CEO of the corporation that I would have loved to have run one day spent that kind of time in his life. If you're going for that job, you can't say, I want work-life balance. You cannot say it. It does not exist when you're running an organization that employs thousands of people and needs to be high-performing. So I think all of this comes down to, as early in the game as possible, demonstrate yourself to be a person who can have power and can have responsibility, so that it's not a question of how nice you are or how tough you are. You have a track record that says, I can do this work. That's my best advice.
Absolutely.
I have 2 things on this. One is very simple. Whenever you speak in an executive or in a management type arena, never say, I feel. Always say, I think. It's a really simple thing, but it's a very subtle shift in how people perceive what you're talking about. The second thing is I think we need to change the adjectives that we associate with business success. So toughness and niceness, these are the wrong adjectives, particularly for business today. I think in our industry, in my industry, which is the technology industry and the marketing industry, those aren't qualities that matter at all. The qualities that matter are openness, curiosity, creativity, collaboration. These are the adjectives that we should be talking about, and these are the adjectives that women in general are great at. And so we should start to bring those adjectives forward in job descriptions, in the way we discuss the types of leaders we want to run our organizations, and the way we talk about the colleagues we want to work with most.
Absolutely. This is a good one.
We'll get you in between the coughs there.
I apologize. I have one comment. I often do get categorized as being tough. And I'm working in a male-dominated field where all of my clients are male. I have maybe 1 or 2 female clients, and they're all tough. They're tough guys. They're playing aggressive sports. So I kind of take it from a different approach. When I hear comments on the street that a CEO of one company is telling a CEO of another company, oh, you don't want to deal with Kim because she's tough. I take that as a compliment because my people wouldn't hire me if I weren't tough. So, I had a meeting with a client yesterday, a potential new client who's a member of the Bruins, and I sat there and I said to him, listen, I'm known as a tough cookie, and that's my job. If I'm not, I'm being soft. And, you know, it's easy for most of my counterparts that I'm dealing with are men, so it's easy for them to kind of use that word and say, oh, she's tough, or, well, I'm tough because I'm not caving into what they want. And I think that from my perspective, I own up to it, I take ownership of it, and I say it right out there, listen, I'm a tough cookie. It's all about coming to an agreement that negotiating an agreement that everybody can be happy with and content with, but be assured I'm not going to just kind of roll over and cater to what your needs are. It's about being tough for my client. So in my arena, I think it's okay to be that way, but I do it in a non-alarming way and say that I'm a tough cookie, because cookie has kind of a sweet connotation to it. So you say it in a way that they're open to it, and specifically for the athletes, they're like, oh, so she's tough. Okay, they kind of like that. They like that you're going to be fighting for them. So that's kind of my
Kim,
thinking.
can I just challenge your use of the word tough with cookie, only because are you trying to moderate the notion of tough? And the reason I question it is, I don't think there's anything wrong with being tough. I think what's challenging is that women aren't seen as tough, and so somehow that doesn't connect with competent. But in your world, your competence has a lot to do with the strength of your negotiating style.
Yes.
If you had a different negotiating style, you might not be successful. So if tough equates to successful, I often think in my world, I know that a lot of people call me behind my back tough. But honestly, truly, if you are in a role where you have to decide to lay people off, make major shifts in your business, close down lines of business, or open up new ones, those are tough decisions. Right. Mm-hmm. If you're not up to tough decisions, then you can't be in the job. So I just think we have to think differently about the use of the word tough, because I think tough in these leadership roles is necessary.
And you have to, I think, take ownership of it. Mm-hmm. I don't take that as a when I had one of my clients, actually Cam Neely, repeated the story to me, and it was in regard to negotiating one of his contracts. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, so-and-so, and I'm not going to use names, said that you're very tough to deal with. And he turned around and said, well, I'm not getting rid of her. I've had her for 20 years, I'm not getting rid of her. That's why I have her. And I said, we kind of chuckled about it, and I said, that's awesome. I'm so psyched he thinks I'm tough. Yes. Mm-hmm. So I really was proud of that moment, mm-hmm. but I also think that there's nothing wrong with it. I agree with you. If you're going to be in those positions where you're going to be making those decisions and you're going to be advocating for your clients or your staff or whatever, you do need to be tough.
I guess going back to sort of that original question of sort of what advice would you give, and thinking about leaders. Leaders have a habit of they're very transparent and they're usually direct. So to step away from a bit of the language and the behaviors, it's more of just making sure there are very clear goals and you establish those goals, and those goals are measurable. Go very back to metrics. If you are, you set a target, let's say it's, $10 million, you hit the 10 million and you exceeded by another 2, no one cares if you're nice, no one cares if you're tough. It's about you hit the goal. So as we think about those characters of a leader, it's about, making it clear on what's your goal and then going out and hitting that goal. So wherever you are in your career, that's where I would begin.
So succeeding in objective terms.
Yeah.
Very much similar to what Helen was saying.
Yeah, I think
on the
sometimes the great one about P&L responsibility is that the goals are usually very clear.
Right.
There's a clear metric. For some of those softer goals, it's how do you turn that into something that's actually measurable?
That's right.
Because if you can measure it, the conversation goes away.
And by the way, being tough does not mean you have to be heartless.
That's right.
Yes.
It really does not. Coming with tough decisions often are results that people will try to say are heartless. But in the grand context, even when you have to do something hard, like laying off hundreds or thousands of people, in the end, what you're doing is saving the jobs of the other hundreds of thousands of people. So if you can't make that decision, you're going to let the whole thing go, that doesn't make any sense.
Right. And one of the things that women will often do, so you've had very good advice about how you have to have measurable outcomes that people can see, but that in and of itself will not bring you to leadership. Leadership isn't just being effective at what you do. So women often will double down, work harder, and they think just by working harder or having excellent results, they will get moved into leadership. And that's only a piece. That's the foundation. But you have to have a proactive strategy for how you are managing your career. And make no mistake about it, you are managing your career. So you have to understand, what are my goals? There is no doubt in my mind that when Kim is negotiating, she is never working with a client where they do not understand what the goal is. You have to understand where you want to go, move it back, build your plan, use your networks, your resources. If you do not spend a minimum of a couple hours per month thinking about where your career is going, you are not effectively managing your own career. And coupled with that, I will say that women in virtually all cultures in the globe are trained to sacrifice, to do for others, which is a wonderful, terrific skill and competency and gift. But that must be coupled with learning to care for yourself. Because leadership is not about sacrifice alone. Leadership is about responsibility and efficacy. Martyrs sacrifice. Leaders renew and refresh. And you need to build into your pathways of how you live your life. How do you bring your A game every day? Which means you have to know your authentic self enough to know what you need and to give it to yourself. And when you do that, the power, capacity, and energy that you bring as a leader is transformative. But if you don't, if you let yourself run to the ragged edge, which, is there any woman in the room who has not let herself run to the ragged edge at some point? You cannot be the best that you can be, and you cannot lead well when you don't have that margin and bandwidth. Because leadership is an incredibly profound and in many times full contact and representative activity. So, one, make sure that you're managing your own career, and two, make sure you're nourishing yourself to play at your A game all the time.
One more thing, I think, as a important thing to think about behaviorally is your relationship with the men in your workplace. So that's, I'm thinking in the moment of, that's defined by the colleagues that you have, but also the colleagues that you expect to have as you make progress in your career. And more and more and more, I see, as I look back at my own career, but as I think about the world that we're currently talking about, the relationship between men and women in the organization is often strained by the intensity of competition. There are only so many opportunities for leadership. And if more men are willing to make more sacrifices than the women who are fewer and really struggling with how much sacrifice I might be willing to make, the numbers are against us. If we look at this as nothing but a competition, we have to begin, I think, to be much more active in the development of male allies. And that doesn't mean that you are giving up in whatever competitive opportunities you are seeking for yourself. But the men that you're working with are just as likely to be able to help you, around you, and frankly, maybe even more willing to help you than the smaller number of women. We all know that there are historical tales of women in the queen bee syndrome that don't want to see other women have it any easier than they have had it, and women who are competitors with one another, who act like mean girls back in the 8th grade. And you know that I'm dead serious about this. So I think a better alliance with the men with whom you work is very important, and really helps you a lot in the over the years as you grow in your career. And I can say from personal experience, you will never know until it's well behind you about the person who's done something for you that you didn't even know was happening because you had a decent and respectful relationship.
Yeah. And I think you have to surround yourself with the best people you can possibly find to work with you, because you don't get to leadership positions alone. It is definitely through the help and wisdom and support and collaboration of the best people you could surround yourself with. I heard another great woman leader talk about the idea that her best boss was lazy and smart, because he wasn't willing to really do anything, but he was so smart that he could give her the best feedback, the best advice, the best guidance, so that she could then go and do and be and achieve. And I thought that was really funny, because you don't really think about it that way, but in some sense, it's really true.
So let's talk about women advocating for themselves, though, because I think that is definitely, certainly things need to change in the outside world, but to a large extent we need to get out of our own way. And I'm almost more comfortable with that, because we can do something about that. That is something we control. So on the first panel we ever did on women powering business, it was in Toronto, and we had the head of women's studies for Ryerson University in Canada, and she just recently conducted a study, and there have been other studies done like this, of how women go after promotional opportunities in companies. And one of the facts that really stuck in my mind was there'll be an opening in a company, and men will apply for jobs 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 levels above them, jobs for which they are uniquely and thoroughly unqualified. Sorry, men in the room. Sorry.
That's true.
And they will truly expect to get it. They won't, they won't be applying as imposters. They'll be applying as contenders. And then a female in the same organization who's missing, 0.7 of qualification 742 will go, maybe I'm not ready. And if I was ready, somebody would tap me on the shoulder. Right. So if I work hard and I prove myself, it will come to me. How do we, first of all, do you recognize that? Do you see that?
Yes.
And number two, what do we do, not even perhaps for ourselves, but for the women in our organizations? A lot of the folks here today have the important role of sponsoring and mentoring women in their own organizations. How do we get past that day? Because I think it will be hard to change. It's hard to win races we don't even enter ourselves in.
Well, the first thing is, I think women have to forgive themselves around any time that there's a lack of meeting expectation. One cannot play unless you're willing to win or lose. And though we may not think of our lives in such stark contrast, you have to be able to say, if I'm not reaching for some things I'm not acquiring, I am not playing at the level in which I should be operating. The benchmark shouldn't be, oh gosh, if I apply for that and don't get it, what will the people think? How will I feel about myself? What will the people in the organization who know? But instead to think, I need to signal that I am ready to take on new challenges, and I am ready to be in the leadership moment and to have the stretch assignments, because stretch assignments are the pathway to promotion. So you have to be willing to put yourself in the game and to say, I release myself, truly, I release myself from the fear that I will not acquire, I will not perform at the level, and try. And you should not apply for jobs where you've done each skill. That's the job you should be in. You need to apply for jobs that are building your skill set.
The panelist from Lean In shared with us on Tuesday. She said, my best quality is I fail really well. And I thought that was so nicely put.
Yeah. I was going to say, at Care.com, our workforce is 60% female. And I think everyone's read the studies and data. You have to ask a woman 6 times to run for office before she'll agree to do it. That some of this doesn't come inherently to us to go advocate for ourselves. So we ask the question every 6 months. What do you want to be doing to get people in the mindset of how are you actively managing your career? So we don't end up with a case of someone saying, how come no one told me about that job? You didn't put it out there that was something that you wanted to do, because we know when people leave Care.com someday, no one's going to wait for, women to show up or to apply for those jobs when, the 19-year-old male is going to go and pursue it.
Kim, you talked about, when we were sitting at the table earlier, you talked about starting your own company. So you were in a well-established company, you're doing great, your career was going great, you were having your first child, and you thought, now is the perfect time for me to start my own company.
I don't know what the heck I was thinking. I literally It must have been something. I mean, I had always had that entrepreneurial bug. I grew up in a household where my father ran his own business, and at a young age, I remember being 17 and him saying to me, "Do you want to do payroll?" And I thought, "Oh my gosh!" He said, "We'll show you how to do it, and you can do it every week, and we'll pay you." I thought, "Okay, great." So that was sort of my first foray into kind of the business side of things. But I got pregnant. I was the first woman in the 40-year history of Wolf Associates to have a baby at work.
To have a baby at work?
To have a baby
Wow.
while working.
Usually most companies.
Yeah. So I didn't give birth, on the 25th floor, but they had no idea what to do with us. Now, fortunately, we were a wholly owned subsidiary of Arnold Communications, and Arnold had other women who had actually had work, but predominantly the men that were in the company were executives. The executives were predominantly male, and they literally did not know what to do with me. They had no maternity plan. Wow. And so they consulted with Arnold, what do we need to do here, and came up with a plan. We followed Arnold's, and so I went out on maternity leave, had sort of laid everything out, organized everything very well, and I had agreed to be available while I was on maternity leave. Crazy enough as that was. And we had come up with an arrangement that I would be available and I would be compensated additionally because I was supposed to be out on leave, and if I was going to do that, I was going to need to be compensated. And as it turned out, when I left, excuse me, from maternity leave, at that time, things started ticking in my head like, okay, when I had gone to my last visit at my doctor's, and she said, before the baby was born, "What are you going to do?" And I was like, I don't know. I really didn't know what I was going to do. I had family that was going to help me, but I hadn't really fully processed it, because in my mind, I was like, I was going to do it all. I was just going to do it, and it was going to sort of figure its way out, which it did. But at that time, I thought, you know what, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And I had always wanted to do this, and I was very fortunate that I had a stable of clients that when I said I wasn't coming back, they just said, "Oh, well, where are you going? And what are you doing?" And they came to me. So I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. But it was hard. I mean, the one crazy thing is people would say to me, "Why are you emailing me at 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the morning?" And I would sort of say,
Free time.
That's when I would be up feeding the baby. Crazy enough, the other thing that I get a lot is people say, "How do the clients feel about you being a woman and your clients are all male?" I say, it's not the clients that have a problem. They never have an issue. They're the first ones to tell me when they're getting married, having a baby. They were totally fine with it. They thought it was really funny that I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning and emailing them. But it's my peers that had more of an issue with it than the clients ever did. And because I had such great clients, they really cared about the work product. And if the work was good, they didn't care where I was or how I did it, whether I was male or female. So that goes to the P&L sort of scenario that we talked about earlier. But I decided, I took that leap at that time, and it was hard, but I was at least had a little bit more. I think I was doing all of this new stuff at the same time. It helped a little bit, but it was incredibly difficult. But I'm very blessed. And I love what I do, and that's the most important thing. And that goes back to what Susie said earlier, being passionate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I tell a little story?
Absolutely.
So when I was at Bank Boston Corporation, it's the oldest continuously operating banking institution in the country, and never had a woman on the management committee. And so, of course, the first woman on the management committee was the head of HR, so stereotypically true. I love HR, and I know we have some strong HR colleagues in this room. I only say that because it's so stereotypical. But to get there was not easy. And I think I'd gone to the Simmons School of Management. I knew all of the strategies about career development, managing career, all of that. When you're in the day-to-day, sometimes it catches you by surprise. So I'm told I'm a candidate for this job when my boss leaves. He's retiring at 65, he's going, and I have a competitor inside the organization. There are two of us. And one day I find out we're competing to acquire Bank of New England, which ultimately we did not get, Fleet got. But we were competing, and my boss called me in and he said, "I want to show you the org charts of this." And he clearly showed me that I was not going to be the lead person to run HR for that new entity that we were going to have if we were successful. And I said, "So what will I be doing?" He said, "You know, you won't be the head of HR because And that's all he said. And I said, why would I not be? And he said, well, you don't have other company experience. And I said, well, you knew when you identified me as a candidate for your successor that I didn't have other company experience. How come you're telling me now when you're leaving 2 years from now, and even if I left today, I couldn't get other company experience and come back? Guess that's true. So all of a sudden, I realize I'm told I'm a candidate. I'm doing everything I'm told I'm supposed to do to be a candidate, but not really am I a candidate. And in that moment, it was such a moment of clarification. I thought, okay, so I have to figure out what I do here. And, there is justice in the world. There really is, because not a month later, we didn't get Bank of New England. I wish we had, because maybe it would just be Bank of Boston instead of Bank of America today, but never mind. But what happened is we started looking for any acquisition we could possibly get. We were out every week looking at 2, 3, 4, 5 banks a week because everybody was failing. Every small bank was failing. And we were allowed to do that by the FDIC. I chose to be the head of the due diligence team for human resources because I had compensation and benefits background, and that was really often the core decision. What's the content of the retirement plan? Are they unionized? All these factors that would determine, are we going to acquire that? And so 3 or 4 times a week, I was in front of the CEO and the COO who were being told by the group of us doing the M&A work, buy this one, don't buy that one. And guess what? It was other company experience, because now I'm looking at the inside information of scores of banks throughout New England and having to make a decision with small, not necessarily perfect information. Do we do it or do we not? Repeatedly, 3 or 4 times a week. I could never have imagined that would be the solution. But when I saw that opportunity, I thought, okay, that's my night job. And it was my night job. I had a day job and a night job. My family couldn't know where I was because every one of them was confidential. So I just said, going away tonight. That was it. And I did that for 18 months. And I am absolutely convinced that that's what in the end won me the job. But you have to be very tactical as well as very strategic.
I want to unpack that as a case for a minute.
Yep.
The really important part of what Helen just said is she used the information. She shared that it was hard to hear. She felt she was put in a position that was no win. But instead of saying, oh, this is horrible, though I'm sure it was.
I did.
That she used the information as information. Anytime you get a data point, you have to figure out, what do I do with that? So instead of just being focused on how it feels, you have to focus with, now that I know it, how do I close that gap? How do I get over the hurdle? How do I move around the obstacle? How do I better identify a sponsor? How do I find a different mentor? How do I gain that piece of experience? And that's the key. Because no matter who you are in an organization, you will have those moments. And depending on your organization and who you are and how the you is perceived, it will be a through line. So if each time there's information, you use it, then you will be highly successful.
Can I share a quick story? Being in a similar situation, I can recall when the company I was at before CARE, and I thought my career path was in technology. And, the example you gave is sort of being heads down 7 days a week. I had 3 teams. I didn't complain. I was a complete martyr. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, pregnant, still there on the ground, go out on bed rest. And I had a relationship with my boss, who was the CTO, where he could call me on my anniversary. He could call me anytime, and I would just take care of it. And he called me shortly after the birth of my child to say, hey, can I come over? I have a glider that you might like. And I was like, oh, that is so sweet. We're so close. Come on over. And while we're there, he says, so what are you going to do when you come back? What are you thinking? I was like, I assumed I was going to come back and take one of my 3 teams. We've hired 3 people to fill in for me. So of course I'm going to take one of my teams back, at least at a minimum. And he said, listen, I'm talking to you now as a friend. You're a mom now. And you probably don't realize it yet, but you can't work the way you used to. You know, you can't be in the office for dinner. And, you know, you're going to have to take on the mom responsibility. So I've been really thinking about it, and I found something else for you to do. You know, and I've been telling you for years, with your skills, you should be outside tech. You should be on the business side. You should be doing these other things. And I remember thinking, he's very smart because legally he's a friend at my home. We're having this conversation. You know, maybe he truly cares. And what am I going to do now with this information? Am I going to pack it up and leave a company whose mission I love so much, not go back or do something else? Or am I going to figure out how to turn the situation around? And, you know, fast forward, having, you know, gone to a new department, gave up my teams, because I decided to try it for a while. It did end up ultimately helping me come up with a new set of sponsors who I didn't know that I had in the organization. And the CEO of that company was actually one of our initial investors in the other company that we went out and started. But I remember in that moment thinking, bait and switch.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, this felt like a complete and utter bait and switch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's because no discussion of I think of women in leadership would be complete without discussion of the work-life harmony question. It's always there. In preparation for the panel, we all read an article talking about the opt-out generation. So this was women around 2000, very successful women on the executive track who decided to took the very difficult choice to stay home, and now in most cases seem to have regretted it 10 or 15 years later as they try to get back into the workforce. And they kind of raise the question, does it have to be on or off?
Right.
You know, do I have to be full tilt or a mother? Is there not ways that both of these things can coexist? And if so, what do I need to do, and what do companies need to do, organizations need to do to make that possible?
Can I lay out the facts?
Lay them out.
Let's lay out the facts. Just like if we're going to all play Scrabble, we need to know what rules we're using. Let's lay out the facts. So there's an ongoing drumbeat around this notion of opt-out, opt-in. One, let me start with this. When women leave and, in essence, opt out from elite backgrounds and so forth, there's been a whole bunch of very good papers written about this. Vanderbilt did a very good paper in the last 2 years on this. Number one, on average, women leave for 1.8 years. Over the entire career span that a female employee will have, 1.8 years is a blink. So that's one. Two, when women leave the workforce in its entirety except for the field of law, which functions differently, you will be underemployed the rest of your life. So it doesn't mean it's not a valid choice, but it is not a choice unless you understand what you are choosing. Point three, the idea of saying that women are opting out. I'm currently writing a piece that is titled, "It is not opt out, it is fed up." So I think it's important when we identify what our myths are culturally, we hang on really tightly, and there's some wonderful studies done to this myth that as women we have this choice. Now, Dawn and I were talking earlier. Now, I did not choose to end up on bed rest, and Donna said she didn't choose to end up on bed rest. Yet I needed to be there. And then lastly, I will note, when we talk about work-family balance, people usually think of children. Women's lives are very long. The time that we are women of childbearing age is a medium-sized chunk of time. There are those of us who choose to have children, there are those of us who wish to have children, and there are those of us who do have children. But all of us have responsibilities in lives, and men too. And this notion that men are supposed to feel no sense of conflict, when Helen talks about male allies, that we are leaving out a population that has never been more active in child rearing in the history of time, I think is a real loss. And note, Amy Cuddy's research from our center, when a woman has a baby, in a corporate environment, several things happen when her behaviors have changed in no way. This is randomized controlled trial studies. This is not assumption. She is viewed as less engaged, she's viewed as more absent, and she's viewed as less committed. When a man has a child in the office, guess what happens? He gets what we call a relational bonus. When Bob has a child, Bob is a nicer guy. We all like him more. We don't think Bob cannot do his job. We think we've got Bob. We have an old breadwinner model, and we believe that Bob is with us and in it. Bob is not going anywhere.
Worried about college now. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the piece is just the way Donna's boss defined the narrative. He drew conclusion. He assumed that he knew better than she did what her life would be. He had already made a whole decision, and he had moved the plan. A narrative is being written for you every day. Every day. If you are managing your career and you have the data to understand what's happening around you, you've got to write that narrative and you've got to market that narrative. So,
excellent.
Those are the facts.
Conscious of time, I'd like to open it up to the audience and hear what questions you may have for our panelists. Who'd like to start? Yes.
I'm just wondering what are the motivational factors for women to be successful as yourself versus men as point of view?
Motivational factors.
I can speak to
Yeah.
that.
So what motivates these women here if it's not those things? Is that the question?
And as their point of view, generally what they think the woman is driven for what? Or it is not money motivation so much.
I'm going to say that money isn't a single driving factor for women. I think it is a driving factor. I mean, for me, listen, we all love money, right? But I'm also, for me, a big driving factor for me personally is I like to win. I don't like to lose at anything. And I think that kind of goes with, you know, I was a competitive figure skater and now I work in sports, but I love to get that win, to close that deal, to have a happy client, and have it be successful. So for me, that's a big motivating factor.
Absolutely.
I love to solve big problems. I have never been happier than in work where the buck stops with me. And even if the decision is very, very serious, I enjoy working my way through what the alternatives are and figuring out what the right answer is. And I've realized that kind of late in life, that's what drives me in this kind of a role. But I really love to feel like problem solved.
I love to make impact. So that's what is really motivating for me. If I feel like I've impacted a community or a relationship or helped someone get somewhere, that is incredibly rewarding for me. You know, money is great, and money is certainly one symbol of success, but I think that there are many symbols of success, and I think today one of the best symbols of success is if you can do something that's going to help the world in some small way.
Excellent.
I'm very close to Deb, huge fan, and very similar on, it's for me, it is also about the impact and creating something where maybe something doesn't exist. I love that challenge, or taking something, idea or a concept and bringing it to life, and then realizing that it's going to extend well beyond me. That gets me very excited.
Other question? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Laura Scott. I'm from Wayfair.com. About 1,000 people in Boston do a lot of mentoring for our content. But one of the things that we're trying to do is bring in more senior women to our organization. We tend to get more and more male and go up the ladder. What recommendations do you guys have for attracting and bringing in senior level women to the organization?
what opportunities do you have? What kinds of opportunities do you have?
Many opportunities for women.
Well, the obvious thing is, are you working with a good sourcing agency? I mean,
I know one.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of obvious. I would start there. But the other thing is, how do you get the word out about who you are and what you need? How do you get that word? Like, for instance, it's amazing to me what you can do with a small amount of public relations to get the opportunities out and the word out about who you are and that you care about this. Because I think with the combination of somebody that can really help you on the sourcing side and your own efforts to make sure you're really promoting the opportunities, this should not be an insurmountable challenge.
To attract women. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for a company like Wayfair, which I mean, I feel like everybody knows what Wayfair is, but maybe that's just in our community. But
that's in your community.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an incredibly exciting, innovative, growing company. It's the largest e-commerce household goods site in the world, and it's here in Boston. And so I think a lot of it does come down to just sort of marketing the opportunity, and for women to get fired up about it. It's pretty easy, actually, because it's such a great product set. It's such a great, exciting company with great leadership. I just think that it's a question.
Yeah.
I shop there all the time. I think it's just really a question of plugging into the people and the networks that are connected to women leaders. I mean, I think one of my mantras is always be networking. Yes. Every single second of every single day, always be networking. And so for the women leaders that you have now, they should always be networking to worm their way to those women leaders that you guys need. It's really going to be more of a one-on-one personal type of sourcing, as well as hiring a great firm.
Hiring a great firm. Women want to work for companies where women do well.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, if you have a lot of women in the ranks lower down, and as you get higher up, there are fewer and fewer. I think that also says something, though, about the culture of the company. Right. As much as it is exciting to be a trailblazer, you would rarely join the company with the opportunity to be the only woman in leadership. That's not near as exciting as it sounds. And there's probably some other conversations that need to happen in your company to make sure that women are being developed and moved up, and that those women in higher level roles understand that one of their jobs is to be ambassadors for female executives, both within the company and outside of the company. Right. All of that has to happen for those recruits to stick if you make them. Yeah, definitely. Other questions? Yes? Yes, sorry.
Hi, my name's Ashley.
Ah. Good firm, I hear.
Give them power, and I like the idea of changing something that's negative into a positive. So I'm curious to know if there's other words that you find yourself not shying away from, but instead of owning. So like you prepared my career to hear that word instead of being like, oh no.
Ambitious is one. She's very ambitious. That's sometimes a compliment and sometimes it's not.
Right, and with women, sometimes people say strategic, tactical, but they say it with that face.
Yeah. That face.
Yeah, absolutely.
Driven's a good one too. I mean, I think driven is certainly a positive word. Driven and assertive are words that I think are hugely positive. And I think that they equate to proactivity, and proactivity is a pro. So I think those are all great words that we should own and talk about ourselves very proudly using.
Yeah, direct. Oh, she can be so direct. I think that's
love
a strength.
that word.
Yes, it's a great one. It's like,
is great.
actually, yes, I am direct.
I would
It's great.
I would much rather have somebody say to me, I'm direct, rather than someone sit up. Who's going to sit up and say, I'm a real BS artist and I talk around in circles? Would you want to do business with that person and waste hours in meetings? And no, it's like, I'm looking at Martha because we work together and we're both very similar that way. And we love it. We love that we're both direct. And if we had a male counterpart or another female counterpart that wasn't, I don't want to be talking about this for 3 days, what I can get done in one conversation. So,
who's got the time?
no, we don't have the time. And I love that word, direct. I think, and you said earlier, assertive. I think that's another thing with sometimes when they say women are assertive, that normally connotates to a negative connotation. I've even heard in my companies that I've worked with over the years, oh, she's assertive, she's you know what, she's the B word. And a guy's assertive, he's a real go-getter. I think that, again, own those words. It's okay to be assertive. It's great to be assertive. It's great to be direct and use that and turn it around in a positive way and say, I'm direct, I'm not going to waste your time. When you ask me a question, I'm going to get right to the answer. This is going to be a great relationship because we're going to be working together on the same track to get it done quickly. Time is money. People want to work with people who are direct. So
I can make money for them.
If those are the words and phrases that describe your personality, find how you can best communicate that in a way that describes you in a very positive way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We had another question here.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm also from Ronstadt. I work on set at Delport. My question for you guys is, you've been talking a lot about bringing yourself up and the self-worth that it takes to be a leader. How are you instilling that same self-worth in the women that you are mentoring?
That's a very good question.
I have found over the course of my career that one of the most important things you can do for women who are growing up through an organization is to get them as much testing and exposure as possible in the most informal ways for as long as you can. So that if a young woman is known to be a solid performer because her mentor, or more importantly her sponsor, has actually endorsed her, but then also she's been seen performing in that way by others, it's paving the way. It's making the way smoother. And this can be as simple as bringing the person to the meeting who actually did the work, probably, because the person who's in the leadership role often doesn't do the work, has to obviously master it in order to present it, but doesn't really do the work. That can be extremely powerful, and it can be such an energizing experience for the person who's coming along, but it also can demonstrate that the person who's doing the mentoring really both endorses this person, but really knows this person. And when you say this person is worth watching, she's going somewhere, there's credibility to that. It's not some unknown person buried down in the organization. So I think that's very important.
I try to challenge the women on my teams to do something that scares them every single day, but make sure that they feel supported in doing that. So it's the question is, all right, go do this and take it and grab hold of it and do it the best you can, but how can I support you in that? What obstacle do you need me to move to make that happen for you?
Yeah. We try and create a safe environment for failure and to embrace failure. We're a big test and learn culture. So, if you never fail, you never innovate. And so really try and encourage that and make sure it's a safe environment. Also, I think people innovate when they're inspired. So we try and also identify opportunities where, they can go to events, like this one, where we bring in other people that we think are inspiring, that we may have access to, so they can actually have that aha moment to say, I could be, that person. Maybe I could be a president of a college. I could be a race car driver. I could do this other thing that was never part of my frame before.
And it all can also be as simple as having a gender-neutral environment. We shouldn't have meetings at 6:30 in the morning. We shouldn't have meetings at 6:30 at night. We shouldn't ask people to get on planes on Sunday night. We shouldn't send emails at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? Those things that may cause, especially some of our aspiring younger women, to say, if I want that, I'm going to need to choose. I really want to have an and organization, and those are small things, but they send a very powerful message, in my opinion. A final question. Yes, ma'am.
And I work with executives, and often from women, I get the question of how do women go about asking for more? Not just the next career, but taking on more responsibility. Because for women, it's seen as land grabbing, and for men, if they don't ask, it's So what are some of your thoughts?
You want to frame it organizationally. I think I have a very significant contribution I could make in this arena. I think it will be instrumental for the unit. Contribution-based, not me-based.
And that's good because sometimes the woman will be more comfortable in saying that. I'm
Right.
doing this for you.
And she's likely to be heard that way. And then the flip of that is when someone says, great job, you can't say, oh, my team is wonderful. You have to say, thank you for recognizing my leadership. The team really performed well. I was so pleased they were able to actualize the plan that was built.
Excellent. Very good
I
advice.
like that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah, I'll use that.
Yeah. Note for next
Excellent.
board meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. So I want to thank our panelists. This has been an amazing, invigorating, inspiring, and educational discussion.
Can I make one
You
little
sure
comment?
can.
Okay. So I'm doing something not on the script, but when I was introduced as a Peace Corps volunteer, my service was in the Republic of the Philippines, which is undergoing enormous turmoil right now. And Donna's company, the ones that she co-founded, Care.com, her co-founder is a Filipina who is now in the Philippines. And so just to say, this morning I was looking for places to go to help out because I'm getting so many requests at Simmons for this. And I just want to say, what I read online was, if you can do something financially, it would be wonderful. Even $1 makes a difference because the peso is worth so little that $1 is a powerful investment. But if you can't, whatever your religious or non-religious tradition, think good thoughts, pray, whatever you do, because the people of the Philippines really need that. Thank you for the minute.
Thank you. If you have any questions for our panelists, I suggest that you come up quickly as they leave the stage. And thank you all for your attention. Have a great day.
Thank you.